Hey, welcome to another live interview with a featured author here on Right On SC, our YouTube channel and also our Facebook channel. We're glad to have you with us. Looking forward to interviewing today Jeffrey Blount, who is the featured keynote at the South Carolina Writers Association's upcoming conference in April. So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to get it kicked off here in just a second. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Hi, Casey. How are you? I'm doing well, thank you.
So we have this little counter that's going to tell us if anybody's watching live. And since we're on Facebook and YouTube doesn't work quite as well on the live side, but some people will start peeking in from Facebook and then there'll be comments and they'll ask questions. So whatever I'm saying to you might get interrupted as we get, maybe some viewers here that are paying attention. But I want to welcome you first of all, to the Right On SC show. Our radio show is here in Columbia, South Carolina, and we've got a relatively good local audience, but we don't have this like national appeal. And so I'm super excited to have you here because I know that you're up in Virginia, but you've got a pretty great national appeal, man. You're killing it. We're going to talk about your writing novels, but before we get to that, give us your journey story. Like, how did you get into your profession? Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up, I'm a farm boy. I grew up in a small town called Smithfield, Virginia. I grew up on that farm, going to school, doing work on the farm and that sort of thing, and ended up getting a part-time job at the local newspaper, The Weekly. And I ended up becoming a cub reporter while I was there. And I fell in love with journalism. The managing editor at the time, soon the publisher of the paper, became a mentor. Has been a lifelong mentor to me. Put me in his car and drove me to Virginia Commonwealth University and introduced me to the folks there in the journalism department. And I eventually went to school there. I then fell in love with television news. The whole idea of putting video and words together to create storytelling was really appealing to me. So that started. At the same time, I was busy writing my way out of, some of my English classes. And one of my professors, who was a published author, said, okay, what we're going to do is instead of you coming to class, you're going to come to my office and we're going to work on your first novel. So we started doing that. And that sparked I'd always had a love of fiction, but that really sparked it in me. And then, the television career took off. Long story short, I ended up working at NBC and directing shows like Meet the Press and Today and Nightly News and Chris Matthews Show. And I didn't have a whole lot of time right then for writing fiction. My wife and I had two lovely children at the time, so life was busy. My wife did go away to bureau duty she was a correspondent for ABC News at the time. And for about 6 months, and during that 6 months, I wrote the novella Almost Snow White, which is my first published work. And then many, many years later, I wrote Hating Heidi Foster. And then many, many, many years later, I'd written it many years before and been worked on over time. But after leaving NBC, after retiring from the news business, The Emancipation of Evan Walls came to life.
All right, I want to dig into the Emancipation of Evan Walls, but before we do that, I have to tell you, I'm a huge fan of Meet the Press. I grew up, my Nana was a big fan of Meet the Press. She watched it religiously every single Sunday. And now me and Chuck Todd are in a little bit of a fight. So I don't know if you know Chuck Todd, but you need to tell him I'm sad because he's clearly a Federalist and all he talks about is how the federal government needs to fix everything for all of us. And I, of course, am a libertarian. These things do not jive with me, right? And so every Sunday morning, I get up and yell at Chuck Todd.
Well, I do know Chuck. Chuck is a great guy, and I'll be happy to pass that message on to him.
I'm sure he's going to be like some crazy lady in Columbia. I gotcha. I mean, I tweet at Chuck Todd about these things. I'm like, you need to stop being such a Federalist, Chuck Todd. Anyhow, all right. So journalism is where I got my start too. I started in sports writing, and isn't it interesting that we start in those places where we're telling real stories, true stories, and then are able to kind of turn that into our fictional world, into those fictional stories. When you go to write the fiction, right? When you turn finally to that lens and you start doing that a little bit full time, do you feel like you earned these stories? And I guess what I mean by that is you come to fiction a little bit later in your life and you've done the writing work to tell the true stories. And now you're like, all right, now I know exactly what to write about. I know exactly how to tell a story that maybe didn't actually happen.
It's so funny. My wife and I had this conversation yesterday in the car because someone had said to me, "Oh, I wish you had been writing earlier. I love your work, and I wish you'd been writing so much earlier." And I was saying to Jean, I think that I came to this at the time that was appropriate for me, for those reasons. The life experiences mean a lot. Also, and part of becoming a journalist or being in the world of journalism is feeling like you can do something for the public by making people aware of things they're not aware of, and the things that they can have the ability to do something to correct or
Right.
there are things that all of us have, these things that we feel strongly about, and I've gotten to a point in my life where particularly early childhood literacy for children of color is a powerful message for me. And it has been for a while when I've been researching the emancipation of Evan Walls and seeing how kids of color, and particularly Black kids, and for my experience, have been fighting for this freedom to do this. So I realized that fiction can be a little bit of a kind of advocacy journalism. You can be telling a true story, but you can be creating the world in which you're able to make the point the way you want to make it, instead of having to take someone else's point. You can focus the area on which you want your readers to concentrate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me, I had a conversation with Richard Ford one time years ago, and he told me that if we are reading fiction, we're developing our empathy skills. And without fiction, we can't develop that empathy. And so it just even a couple of weeks ago in this technology networking thing I was in, and this guy goes, "I lack empathy. I think I need to work on that." I was like, "You need to read more fiction." That's how you get it. So I think you're exactly right. I love that you said that you came to this at the exact right time. So not to make light of the first two novels, but let's focus on the emancipation of Evan Walls. What's the message here? What are you working on here? This is your preoccupation. So share it with us. Tell us a little bit about this book and what you'd like to do with it.
The message is early childhood literacy and dreams, and for kids of color who are intellectually inclined to be free to follow those dreams. So the story of Evan Walls is based on really an article I read many years ago about a young Black boy living in what we then called the projects, who was, and I like to say he's an intellectual giant. In those days, we would say young, gifted, and Black. But he was attacked physically and emotionally by his own peer group, other Black children, because he was being so smart. And they saw this as something being color-coded white. Right. And so he became, at that point, you become the Uncle Tom, or you're acting white for trying to become educated. And there's just something wrong with that. Right. And as the more research I did, the more children I found in this issue, having this problem. Kids who were afraid to go to school, kids who were being battered, kids who then took their own lives because of this. And so I thought that, I had a discussion a long time ago when I thought about this book, and my mom and I talked about it. And it was something that I felt strongly that I needed to write. And I needed to take all of these stories of these children that I learned about, and a little bit of my story, and put it into a book that I hoped would illuminate the problem. And, it's been hiding in plain sight, and I just wanted to put a spotlight on it, and then to create a conversation for people who didn't know it existed, or people who knew it existed were afraid to talk about it. Right. And that has happened.
So tell me about your publishing journey with this piece. I mean, you're in a situation now, you're far enough into your career where you've got some connections, you've got people who are interested in what you can do, they know what you can do. And then you say, well, I have this piece. So what did it look like? Were people excited about it? Did they tend to feel a little bit, concerned about it? Was it something that tell a little bit about that, the publishing journey?
Well, no, it was a complicated piece, and I knew it was going to be a complicated piece because I think people didn't want, people within the African American community, some people view it as, hanging out the dirty laundry. And so I knew that it would be complicated. And so the journey to get it published was complicated based on that. The strange thing that happened to me, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit in my keynote, is that my big break came out of the blue. So because of Almost Snow White, that book I'd written back in the early 1990s, was me, a male author, writing with a female protagonist. And so an agent called and said, I wanted to put you together with this other writer, another writer of mine, a guy by the name of Jonathan Odell, who is a white Mississippian who writes a female character who's Black. And talk about how you guys are crossing over these lines. And so in the process, I sent what was then called Crab in a Bushel Basket to Marley Rusoff.
Right.
And then Marley read that, and she brought it to life. And she said, oh, I like this. I will represent you with this. And then we began the long process of finding a publisher who was comfortable with taking a chance on this material.
Yeah, gosh, Marley's such a great advocate. She really is for all of her authors. I think that's really interesting. I didn't realize that Almost Snow White was from is it a first person narrator?
No, it's
okay.
Yeah.
So both of my first and second novel are both from a young man's point of view.
Yeah.
And so I get a lot of that too, where it's like, why is she writing from a male point of view? And at the same time, it's like privileged white kid in the suburbs in the 90s. And I'm like, nobody wants to read this book right now. Like, nobody.
Well, I'm going to be on a panel talking about this very issue about who can write what. So it's an interesting topic. And so Marley just wanted us to talk about that. And then our relationship grew from that, and the book grew from that. But I am of the opinion that all of us are able to tell stories and different stories. And if we do it wrong, we'll be held accountable for it by readers and by reviewers and that sort of thing. But and I just read an article with James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, both saying everybody should be able to write whatever they can write.
Yeah, and tell the story that you're meant to tell, right?
Exactly.
And write the book that you want to read, right?
Right,
So,
exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that too. There's a liberating factor to think like I'm not bound by my own personal experience. With fiction, I can imagine the experiences of others.
Well, I mean, if you look at so one of the most brilliant writers today is Jesmyn Ward, and her main characters are all African American. She's African American. But she's had substantial white characters in the book. Well, she would never be able to write that if she was never able to write about a white person in a story. So so that it's a longer conversation, and but it's certainly a worthwhile one, and I think we need to go through it in the publishing world.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And you mentioned that panel. It's going to be part of the South Carolina Writers Association annual conference, which is April 16th through the 18th. I'm going to put up the website where people can register if they're interested in coming to that. So how did you get involved with this, and what made you decide you wanted? So SCWA is my jam. Like, I've been doing this. That was my very first writers group, was the Columbia Writers Alliance here in Columbia. And then from there, I found SCWA, and I have been a part of the organization for a long enough time that I'm watching it grow and get bigger and get, just better. It feels like every year we're getting better. And so we're so thrilled to have you as part of this. But how did you come to this? How did SCWA approach you? How did you get into the loop here?
It came really through Marley, and it came really because initially for me, because like so many other people, I'm a Pat Conroy fanatic, and I love his storytelling. And obviously Marley represented Pat Conroy. When I ended up on her website on the same page because of our last names, I was over here, Blount, and there was Pat Conroy's picture right there. I was ecstatic. But she always talked about South Carolina being the storytelling state.
Right.
She talked about Pat Conroy saying that the four most important words are "tell me a story," and so I wanted to be a part of that. And when Dean and I visited Marley quite a bit, and we created a friendship group, and I have developed a friendship group among authors there in Beaufort and surrounding areas. I've spoken there. And I feel very, very comfortable there, and very comfortable talking about writing, and love the fact that I can sit down at dinner with these I consider myself as far south, but I consider myself a Southern writer, and we sit and we talk about our experiences and how we craft them and how we put them in books and how we put them in stories and what they mean, and I just love that. And so coming down to speak and be on this panel, to me is an extension of all of that. So I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Well, we're glad to have you. So I'm from South Carolina, grew up in Virginia, and then came back to South Carolina for college. And so, from a fellow Virginia, considers myself a Southerner, where I always try to explain to people that I'm like, Virginia really is part of the South, right?
Yes.
We might not sound like the rest of you in the South, but we really
Right.
are part of the South. So,
Right.
all right, what's next? What happens after this? So you've got the Emancipation of Evan Walls. First of all, tell people where they can find it, other than your website, which I shared. Tell us where we can find it, where they can buy it, where they can see you and learn more about it.
Well, the beautiful thing about this book is where, it is continuing to just grow. And so you can find it. I know a lot of people, and after being out on my tour, I'm trying to be as pro library as I can. It's at libraries everywhere. You can buy it. And a friend of mine just told me that she had just picked it up in a nice bookstore in Virginia. And so you can find it in your bookstores, which is a kind of nice thing to do if you have an independent bookstore in your town. Buy it there, ask them to order it if they're not carrying it. But of course, you can find it online at Amazon and Barnes and Noble and those places as well.
Of course. And so what happens next? So we're still promoting this book. And then what are you working on now? What's the next thing to come?
Well, simultaneously, the conversation about Evan Walls is continuing to grow. So I'm actually speaking all over the country about this particular issue, and and that's been a great thing because it's been eye-opening to a lot of people. But I'm continuing on this theme of childhood literacy, and accompanied with the idea of, I don't want to call it the cancel culture, because to me, I don't even really like that phrase, but
right.
the idea that about redemption.
Okay.
So, and where we can find redemption, if we can find it at home, or if we have to leave someplace, leave and go somewhere else to find it, and what does it look like? So this book is about redemption, and this book is about the person receiving or looking for that redemption, finding themselves in a place where that kind of childhood literacy is needed,
right.
and raising himself and others up through that. So that's what it's about, and Marley and I are very excited about it, and so we're working towards that, the next book.
I'm excited for you. It's fun to find that thing you're preoccupied with and then just sort of talk about it and think about it and write about it and work on it all the time.
That's right. Exactly.
It's really wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for being here. We're looking forward to the event on April 16th through the 18th. We're going to do, so Right on SC is a live stream partner. So we'll be doing a lot more of these. It'll look just like this. We'll be glad to have you back if you're available at all over the weekend, that weekend, to just talk about what your experience is with the conference and what you're looking forward to on there. Give us a little preview of the keynote speech. So the keynote's on Sunday, and it's supposed to be, I think it's about being shy, isn't it?
Well, that's what the panel is about. The panel is about many authors who can write these lovely, beautiful, powerful books, but can't present them or the issue that the book is about publicly. They just are just too timid or just too stage fright or whatever. We're going to talk about how to overcome that, and what you need to bring out of yourself to help you overcome that. The keynote is really going to be, in many ways, what we're talking about, my journey that led to Evan, leading to bringing out some of the stories of some of the children, and talking about why it's important that we have this, why Evan's story is important to us, not only just for children, but for us as a nation, for us as a world, because these children sometimes grow up to create things that make all of our lives better. Right. And we all suffer when we deny somebody an education or right to dream through education. So that's what the keynote will be about.
Agreed. Absolutely. I can't wait to listen to it. I'm so excited. I'm glad to finally meet you in person, or digitally anyway, and look forward to the day where we can get together with our pals in Beaufort. And my bestie, Jonathan Haupt, down there at the Pat Conroy Literary Center. They're such great supporters of SCWA and of our organization. So again, thank you so much for being here and being part of it. And we'll chat soon. You don't have to run away. I'm going to play us out, and then we can chat just a little bit further after we go off the air.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Casey.